guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing very nice. I'm sending a lot of hugs and positivity to all of you. Hi, if you're new, welcome to the channel. I really hope you enjoy the content, and if you do, please do consider subscribing. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about books which I did not expect are going to be such gems. The 11 books that I read in the month of May. None of them were like on my radar. Some of them are new releases. Basically, I just read the books as they came, except for a couple of them. In any case, all of these books made me forget that I was reading, and I was completely sucked into the world while reading them. And that is what we all need, an escapism from reality sometimes when we are reading books. Though I did not need escapism, but it was fun. I'm going to talk about all the books in the sequence in which I read them, so watch the video till the end to get a recommendation for yourself or a 5-star read. And that is it. Let's begin the video. First, let's talk about the 2 non-fiction books that I have read. Yes, I read 2 this month because both of them were like really thin. One, we have Roar Like a Goddess by Acharya Shunya, and then we have The Last Lecture by Randy Poch with Jeffrey Zalsau. As I said, I read the books as they came, and I was actually reading this, but then this came and I was like, you know what, I'll just read it. So I got it on day 1, and on day 2 I was already reading it. But first, let's talk about Roar Like a Goddess. This book is a complete guide for anyone who needs a reminder of what divine feminine energy is to bring out the goddess within yourself. It talks about the feminine energy from perspective of spirituality, and it has its roots in the Vedas. And the thing is that it took me so long to pick up this book. I got it I think 2 months back because I thought that there'll be a lot of like difficult words or difficult things to understand when it comes to the Vedas. But on a whim, I just picked it up. I was like, I really want to read something like this, so I'm just gonna start reading it. I want a motivational read, so I'm gonna start reading it. And it is so not difficult to read. Even though it has its roots in the Vedas, it is so modern, for a lack of a better word, and you come to know how rich or how strong women are and have been since the beginning of time, and how you can use all of that power which is already within yourself. It just needs a trigger in the modern times too. It was so nice to read something so inclusive. It was so nice to read something so empowering, and it was almost like an affirmation, and some pages in it I actually needed it at the time because they were about self-care and not pushing yourself too much just to prove yourself to some people, and how you can build boundaries and how you can make more money, everything, all of that packed up in one book. So it was an amazing read. To all my ladies out there, go get this book. You're going to love it. When it comes to The Last Lecture, this book has only shocked and stunned me the whole time I have been reading it. It is given by a man who had cancer, and he knew that he had only a few months to live, and he wanted to do something for his children. And he's written in the book that if he was an artist, he would make a painting, and if he was a songwriter, he would write a song. But he's a lecturer, and so he gave a lecture and he gave lessons in living, and that is what this is. Now, because it is written with so many emotions and so much passion, it has a lot of cut short lessons. Sometimes here and there it just felt so scary to be reading it, because I was like, oh my god, like do I have regrets in my life? Am I doing okay in my life? And I started questioning everything, what my legacy is going to be. But on the other hand, it was so striking that it is actually life changing. Like, it's not going to change your life slowly, it strikes you on your brain. You have to take it like a lecture and then pick up the things that you want and let go of the things that you don't want. And then we start with the fiction books. First, we have Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Now, this book I started reading. I did not finish it till the end of the month because I started with the Agatha Christie shelf, but I read about 100 pages, and then I started rereading it after doing the Agatha Christie shelf because I sort of forgot what I was reading before the Agatha Christie shelf. This is a story of Eleanor Oliphant, who has a very rigid set routine, what she will do on the weekdays, what she will do on the weekends. She has no friends, she only has her job, and her life is encapsulated between her job and her home, and that is it. She has her own opinions and she has her own judgments, and reading them was like really funny, and that's how it is in the beginning. But as you move forward, you realize that there is something more to discover about Eleanor Oliphant, and though she may be saying that Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, she's not fine at all. There were so many bits and pieces throughout the book about her past till the last page that there was actually a little bit of like suspense in this, and I was in that space of suspense to find out what actually happened, even though this is not a suspense book, and it also has a little bit of romance even though it is not a romance book. It is basically the story of Eleanor Oliphant. Now, is it easy to read? Yes, you can definitely start reading with this book. It is a little slow because it is character driven. At least for the first 100 pages, it is only building up and you only get to see how rigid Eleanor's routine is. So it may get a little boring for you, because it did get a little bit boring for me, but once you cross that 100-page mark, it gets so sweet to a point where Eleanor is like my most favorite character in the whole world. I kept crying at so many places after that, and this is literally one of my most favorite books ever. Just seeing the journey of Eleanor, everything that she went through, it was tragic. Oh yes, make sure you're reading the trigger warnings for it, but it was not tragic in a dark way where everything is dark. It was tragic in a way where there was hope in the end. Next up, I read Virtually Lost by Shreyan Laha, another book that was not on my TBR, but I got it and I started reading it because the concept was just so interesting. This is the story of a woman, Manisha, who is a professor of psychology. She goes to Pathabhrashta, where the whole world is like the interface of social media, and people are looked at like social media profiles. There is no space for privacy. Everybody is under constant surveillance, and this is basically the story of what would happen if social media was actually our real world. So this is a sci-fi book, and I don't read a lot of sci-fi books, so I do want to get into it now, and which is why I have like a couple of books that I'm reading. And I was stunned by this book too, because I was not expecting to actually enjoy sci-fi. I always see sci-fi as a very difficult genre to read, but this one was not difficult to read. It was very easy to read and super duper interesting, because of which I could not keep the book down. Yes, it was a little slow in the beginning because you learned about this whole new world or a new community, and it takes a little bit of time, but then as you move forward, it becomes a page turner and you cannot keep it down. So if you're a beginner and you want to read a sci-fi book, or you want to just read an interesting story of what happens if the social media becomes a part of the real world, then this is your book. Next, we started with the Agatha Christie shelf, and I'm not going to give a lot of information about all the 5 books because I do have reading vlogs on it, so you can go and check that out. So I'll give you a brief reaction to each book. The first book is The Mysterious Affair at Styles. This is what it looks like, and it looks super old, and it is hardcover, so that was an experience within itself. This book is 103 years old. It came out 103 years ago, and Agatha Christie probably wrote it like before that. I wanted to see what Agatha Christie can do 103 years ago with mystery and crime and thrillers. This was actually a bet. Somebody challenged her that she cannot write a book where you'll not be able to find who the killer is, but then she did write such a book, and that is just really cool. Next, I read one of my most favorite books by Agatha Christie, which is Peril at End House. This is the story of a woman who has had recent accidents. Her name is Nick, and Poirot is there when one of the accidents is taking place. As Poirot inquires more, you come to know that they were not actually accidents, they were attempted murders. And even though Poirot wanted to retire at this point, he wanted to save this woman, and so he takes up the case and he takes care of her, and then you see what actually happened. This is one of the most fun books I have ever read by Agatha Christie. All the other books that I have read till now, even after this, none of them were this funny and just like fun to read. With Hastings and Poirot and their conversations and looking at how Hastings looks at people and how innocent he is, it was all so interesting. So this was one of my favorite books ever when it comes to the entertainment value and not just the suspense, though the ending was also worth it. After that, I read Dumb Witness, and I must admit that actually 2 reasons I got this book was, one was the cover, because it's just still even now it's utterly pretty to me, and 2 because it was the Dumb Witness and there was a dog, and I thought that the dog would play a major role in the book, but I was disappointed because the dog does not play that major of a role. This one is also the longest book I read, and yes, I did get a little bit bored in the middle, and honestly speaking, I could not pinpoint one thing as to why I enjoyed this book. I just enjoyed it in a way where you just enjoy some author's writing, and I was having a lazy day, so it was interesting to read a book like that on that day. After all of that slowness, I read something super thrilling, and it was Death in the Clouds. This one was actually super interesting because of the way in which the murder took place. I think that was the highlight of the book, that the clues were like insane. You would want to have a chart and stuff to place all of the things and figure out what actually happened. It did not have Hastings, and in my mind I have associated Hastings with the fun element or the fun side of Poirot, so you don't get the funny side of Poirot in this, but you do get to see the serious, amazing detective. After all of those books, I was actually afraid that I'm getting into a slump, and so I decided to cut short the Agatha Christie shelf, and I was actually very scared to read the next book, but it is the most popular book by Agatha Christie, so I had to read it, and the book is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. This is the story of Mr. Ackroyd who dies, and he knows the secret of a woman that she has killed her husband, and that woman also dies before Ackroyd dies. But as you move forward, it turns interesting, and honestly this restored my faith in Agatha Christie because I got so bored with Dumb Witness compared to all of the other books. Like, I did not get that sort of a thrill, but then I read this and I was blown away. Like, you have to see that vlog for sure. I got a few comments in that vlog saying they did guess the ending, and if you did, you are genius, okay? And there is no comparison to your intellectual capacity. When I thought that I'm getting into a slump though, I thought of reading something else and then getting back to Agatha Christie, and because I did not want to fall into a reading slump, I started reading Woman Eating by Claire Corda. This one I again received literally 2 days ago or 1 day ago, and I just started reading it because it just sounded so interesting to me. I was totally in the mood for something like magical, whimsical, outlandish, oh it doesn't really happen, fantasy. But this is not a romance and it is not a fantasy, it is nothing like that. It is just the story of a simple vampire trying to survive in the human world. On one hand, it can be a simple story of a vampire that is hungry, and you get to see her struggles with hunger and what she does and what her journey has been, and it can be a very simple and nice story. So if you look at it from that perspective, it will be a little slow paced. But on the other hand, if you look at it like an onion and peel off all the layers, you realize that this is the story of a woman who is different from the people around her, and you see her struggles with fitting in with all of these people. You see her struggles with all of the conditioning that she has been given since childhood, and now she has to rewire herself. You see her struggles as a woman in the world, and if you read the book like that, it is so insanely well done because you are reading about a vampire, not an actual human being. So it's interesting, but at the same time the topics are literally what we go through every day. There's a point in the book where she's talking about how in the movies and the books that she watches and reads, it's very easy for vampires because they're like always rich, and she's wondering how those people get all the money and where do they get all their food from, because for her it is so difficult, and she's 23 years old and she's so young and she's not able to navigate her life. She can't even handle a job. And when I was reading that paragraph, I was like, how is that any different from us human beings when we read books or we watch movies and we see people achieving these things and we set unrealistic expectations for ourselves, that why are we not over there, and why does it look so easy for other people? Why does it look so easy for books and movies to get all of these things? Though I will remove books from this because when I'm reading this I don't feel like that, and we feel like we're lacking something in our own lives, even with social media. That one point crazed me out, how relatable that was, even if I was reading about a vampire. And also because she's a vampire, she gets these urges to have human blood, and whenever she's having that urge, the book is written so well that it felt like you are about to sleep and then you wake up. So like she goes into that urge deeper and deeper and deeper, and just about when she's about to do something, she comes out of it and you wake up as a reader. So this book is amazing. I am in love with it, and you must read this book. I think I talked about this book the longest and it deserves it. Last but not the least, I read Girl, Goddess, Queen by B.F. Fitzgerald, another book that I did not even have in the month of May. So how will I think that I'm going to read it? It was a surprise mail. I was not expecting it at all, but once I got it, it's pink color and it has Girl, Goddess, Queen on it, and it is thick, and it is the story of Persephone, who I have read about in The Touch of Darkness, and it's Greek mythology, and all of that just made me start reading it. So I did start reading it. I actually was not going to read it for the May wrap up, but it was so interesting that I finished reading it already, and now it's in the wrap up. When you read about Persephone, especially the way I read about her in the other book, you realize that there are so many notions around her, that she was kidnapped or someone took her to hell, or in that book I read that she fell into a contract with Hades under false pretenses. But when you read this book, you realize that it was actually Persephone's decision to go to hell, go to the underworld, and to make a pact with Hades because she does not want to get married. So you get to read the story of Persephone, what she does, how she is evolving. Another story of another woman, and I was also in love with this one because yet again, fantasy, Greek mythology basically, a fiction storybook. And yet when I was reading it, I was feeling all the feels of empowerment and how you feel held back sometimes, but you can break the glass ceiling, and how there are defined roles for different genders, but you can break them because Hades, oh my god, I can't believe this, but I like Hades in every book that I'm reading. So yes, this one was also a treat. You would think that it's so thick and big and it will be intimidating, but it was not. The text inside is big and it's just so interesting, and so many twists and turns happen that it keeps you hooked the whole way through. It's going to come out in July. It's not out yet, so you have to wait for some time before you can get it, but if you can get your hands on it in July, I'll put a reminder again in some of my videos. Definitely get it and read it. As you can see, I was on a binge this month. This is not exactly a binge, but after this I read Lessons in Chemistry, so I was sort of like in a binge with all the stories of all women, and I read Roll Like a Goddess also, and I was reading all of these stories of all women and them doing all of these things and going through stuff and then overcoming them. I have felt so empowered the whole month. It was crazy. And with that, we come towards the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it and got at least one recommendation out of it. My birthday videos are coming up this week, so do stay tuned. I'll see you guys very soon. Bye.